Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I know you are logging in from different parts of the world, so a warm welcome to each one of you. While we wait for the last few people to join, let us know which part of the world you are connecting from. So please write in the chat box. We have Italy, we have Spain, Belgium, US, India, Amritsar. Oh my God. Oh, a lot of people. A lot. Very, very good. Okay, okay. So it's great to have a global community gathering here today. My name is Maria Giovanna, and I'll be your host for today's session. I'm really thrilled to be joined by Katie Mesia, Design Resilience Leader and Director of Sustainability at Gensler, who will share her expertise on how design standards and certifications shape healthier, more sustainable built environments. This webinar is part of the ECONYL Academy, a resource platform dedicated to sharing ideas, best practices, and industry benchmarks to inspire more responsible, innovative approaches for people and the planet. Before we dive in, just a few quick housekeeping notes. So the chat box, you will find it at the bottom right of your screen. Please feel free to post your questions, comments, or reflections there throughout the session. We will have a dedicated Q&A at the end. Technical support. If you experience any issues, let us know in the chat. Our team is online and ready to assist you. Recording. For transparency, this webinar is being recorded. If you can't stay for the full session, don't worry. We'll share the link with you afterwards. And so, with that, let's get started. So please join me in welcoming Katie Mesia from Gensler. And before starting our discussion today, Katie, I'd like to place a very quick and fun question. I know that you are passionate about green design, but what if you were a color? What color would you be?
Oh, if I was a color,
Yeah.
I think I would pick white because it is what happens when you mix all the colors together.
Yeah.
Bright and shiny. That's my choice.
Fantastic, fantastic. Great question, great answer, actually. Thank you. And please, can you give us 2 words about yourself? Because I read
Sure,
these very interesting job titles, but please, 2 questions, two words about you.
sure. So, I'm the Firmwide Director of Design Resilience at Gensler. Um, and day to day, I spend about 50% of my time with clients who have deep green aspirations. So maybe they're trying to go net zero energy, water waste, those types of clients who are really pushing the boundaries where we're not sure exactly how we're going to do it, but we're all moving towards a mission together. The other half of my time is spent sort of inside of Gensler, working to provide my colleagues with education, inspiration, and ways that they can increase their impact through the work that's on their desk every day.
Okay, that's fantastic. I think you are doing a great job. I'd love to be with you, actually, because you are so inspiring, really, really.
Oh, thank you.
So let's start with the questions. Can you share what prompted the creation of the Gensler Product Sustainability Standards that we are calling now from now on GPS as an acronym?
Yeah.
How it was developed and why Gensler decided to make it a public resource. So you did it internally and then you decided to make it public.
That's right.
So how everything starts and why you decide to go public.
Sure. So it began just internally. We have something called the Gensler Research Institute, and that's a group that they do their own research, but in addition to that, they sort of provide grants and scholarships, if you want, internally for practitioners who have an idea that they want to explore. and
Mhm.
they organize and coach you through that research. And there was a group out of our New York office who really wanted to explore which materials in the built environment had the largest impact when it comes to embodied carbon. Like, where should we focus as we move forward with this goal of reducing embodied carbon in our work? And from that research project, they identified, 12 key materials or product types that they felt in an interiors project would really reduce embodied carbon. And they did the same for architecture. And when we looked at the architecture and interiors side by side, it became apparent that we have more control over the things that were on the interiors list. The building list is something we're addressing now, and we can talk about that later. But it involves things like concrete and structure where, you're heavily involved with other consultants. But from that, the 12 interior materials were sort of discovered where we can have the most impact. And that spawned a second research project where we tried to understand how could we set a baseline internally? What is good when you're selecting these materials in terms of embodied carbon? And then that led to some benchmarking, what can we ask for without adding cost? What's reasonable, what's available in the market? And we ended up with a baseline number and sort of an exemplary performance number, a higher bar. Market differentiator is what we call it. And so that took a lot of time because we had to research a lot of products and we talked to a lot of vendors and we talked to manufacturers and we really tried to understand what was going to work, what would be doable and aspirational simultaneously. Um, and after doing that, and having all of those conversations and coming up with the criteria in detail, it just seemed like the right thing to do to share it. I think sometimes, in research, you develop intellectual property. In this case, I think there was some intellectual property, but the bulk of what we did was gather and collate information from others. And in gathering and collating, we were able to come up with these benchmarks. And we have the luxury sometimes because of our size to do those things. And then we presented it, on the website. Um, and we are thrilled that other people are using it as a reference. Some other architectural firms use it as well. And when it comes to this space around sustainability, there's not a lot of reasons why you would hold something very tight because it is something that is we're all working on it together,
Yeah.
and a lot of it is physics and science, and that's not proprietary, so whatever we can do to move the built environment forward, that's where we're focused. And that's our ultimate goal is to reduce the impact of the built environment on the planet.
Indeed. I think in any case, sustainability, in my opinion, makes also transparency a key and open
Yeah.
innovation as you did, because you did open innovation. So you did research internally and then decided to go public, sharing
Mhm.
all your information. So I think this is actually the key point of being sustainable nowadays. It's not a matter of I am sustainable, you are not. It's a matter of we are sustainable and we help each other in becoming more sustainable every day.
Yeah.
So, Katie, you mentioned many times embodied carbon. Why was the embodied carbon such a critical starting point? And how does that focus shape decision making around products and materials?
Yeah. I think we have been talking about operational carbon for a long time, and we know the levers to pull on an operational carbon side of things, but we were not as comfortable with embodied carbon. And when we were talking about the total impact of our projects, it became clear that we couldn't only focus on operational carbon, we needed to move it to embodied carbon. I will say that GPS covers many other categories because you never want to just move one thing forward um, at the detriment to other things. So that's why it includes things about human health and other things in there. Um, and we can talk about more about that later if you want. But um, what we're trying to do is make real measurable impact, and we're trying to really understand how we can reduce um, the our body of work in terms of its impact on the planet, while still, building and doing many great things, creating many great spaces. And that's sort of what opened the door for embodied carbon, just wanting to more thoroughly understand um, how we are participating in the market and the impacts that we're having.
Yeah, and you mentioned human health actually. So frameworks like WELL focus
Hmm.
explicitly on people and organizational well-being. How
Yeah.
does the people-centered perspective align with the intent behind the human health pillar of GPS?
Hmm. I mean, I feel like all of sustainability, if you ask why enough times, is about human health, right? It's about the well-being of the people. When we talk about the planet being healthy, it's because we want everybody to be able to live here for a very long time. So it's always human-centric. Um, when we were looking through and researching GPS, it just became very evident that we couldn't focus solely on embodied carbon, that it was important if we were creating waste, if things could be recycled, or if they couldn't, if they could be reused, that we wanted to understand, some of the chemical components that we were using. And, we're not scientists in that way, but we still want to be responsible, um, with what we're selecting. And the chemicals that are in products, it's an interesting thing to study, and it's interesting to understand where people are um, interacting with those chemicals. Is it something that happens in the factory? Is it something that happens in the space? And in the end, when we're doing this on projects, employers really care about the people that work for them. A hotel is built for its guests. And so these types of efforts where it's centered on making somebody, taking care of somebody and watching out for them, that really resonates deeply, I think, with clients. I mean, if you think about how much time people spend when if you have a new baby and you think about what exactly they're touching and what they're putting in their mouths, and it's just very careful and considered. I think, we're bringing a little bit of that into the design space.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed here we have also a question, but we make all the questions at the end of our conversation. So please
Okay.
stay with us. Um, you mentioned also metrics, and I think that metrics are very, very important. So sustainability often starts at a global scale with climate impact, emissions, and planetary boundaries. So very, very high concepts. All these
Hmm.
concepts can feel, the feeling can be a little bit abstract. How
Hmm.
does a GPS help translate these macro level concerns into tangible impacts on human health and everyday experience?
Yeah. One thing that we like to talk about internally is the magnitude of change that you're able to make when you're in the design profession. So, for instance, if you decide to be a vegetarian because you don't want to eat meat for many reasons, but maybe one of them is that you don't want to eat meat because of the impact on the planet. You know, that's a noble decision. That's a decision that everybody makes personally. And the magnitude of that impact is significant. Um, but it is also the same magnitude of impact you have when you choose 10,000 square feet of carpet. And so the leverage that you have in the design profession, because you're selecting materials, it really, really is a great multiplier. We have the opportunity to make generational impact with the decisions that we make. And that's true with interior building materials, but it grows even more when we start talking about concrete and steel and glass. So we need to take those opportunities very seriously. And I think in some ways, although it's a little counterintuitive, we have to back away from being perfect. And we just have to move every project forward, every decision forward. And because the scale is so large, if you do a little better, you're still making a fantastic difference. Maybe the equivalent still of your whole lifetime of being a vegetarian, you
Yeah,
know, just by being a little bit better in your carpet selection, for instance. So, um, I think that's kind of where the urgency comes from and where it starts to relate really to the person and the project and breaks out of this sort of like global impact scale. It can be intimidating to try to solve a global issue. And so it's very important to bring it down to the opportunities that you have in front of you and know that your lifetime of good choices in the design industry is going to add up to something that's very, very meaningful. Um, but you don't have to solve it alone.
yeah,
And you may or may not see an exact metric of the difference you've made. Part of us tracking embodied carbon and operational carbon is that we want to hold on and measure the impact because saying you're having impact and knowing you're having impact are different. Um, but still, you can make many instinctually good choices and have a tremendous impact. And then hopefully you get to measure it and have proof.
yeah. It's like, when they say you are a drop, but a lot of drops make the seas and the oceans. This
Yes.
is the same
Yes.
concept. So you have to do what you can and what is important for you, both personally, but also on the business side of the things. But it's
Hmm.
very, very important to act together for the same exact goal. So, which is our future, by the way, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
And
when you
I'm
are,
I'm
yeah,
so
sorry,
heartened that people on this call are just from all around the globe.
yeah,
Because sometimes in this space, in this profession, you feel kind of like you're working by yourself,
yeah,
you know,
I know the
and
feeling.
yes, it can feel like that sometimes, but it makes me feel fantastic to know that there are many of us who are working towards this goal, even though we may not know each other.
Yeah,
Just to know that there's a really big community out there working towards the same goal. Um,
ex-
it,
yeah,
it
yeah.
is comforting.
Absolutely. But Katie, when you're talking with your clients, how do you frame sustainability and human health in a way that matters to them? Because sometimes it's difficult. You have a business person in front of you, and the majority of the times, money is the driver, or
Yeah.
saving is the driver. It depends how you look at it. So
Hmm.
what do you use to convince them to do the right thing, to choose the right material, to make sure that sustainability is always considered?
Yeah. I think the first thing is to understand which decisions actually have a financial implication and which don't. And for the things that are minimal or don't have a financial implication, we don't need to ask for permission to do those. You have to take a big chunk of what falls into the realm of sustainable design and just move it into good design, design excellence, um, a an experience that clients are expecting. So once you sort of move a bucket over there and say you're just going to do it every time and you don't have to ask for permission, then there are other things where you do need to have conversations about it. And the way that we go about this is we try to research our clients' businesses to understand how they run. So, for example, a stadium will make money in a very different way than an interior space for knowledge workers, right? The value proposition, or a law firm, the way that they're making money is different. And you need to understand how they make their money. And once you do that, you understand kind of in this realm, in this conversation, what's important to them, right? And so in a law firm, for instance, they want people to feel great in the space because they're going to be there for a really long time. They're going to work long hours, and they want them to feel comfortable, right? They need the lighting to be something that doesn't like give them a headache. They want to be there, and they want to give them places that they can sort of relax, and places where they can be very productive. And they also want to use their space for recruiting, right? They're in a sort of a war for talent, and they want to make sure they're bringing those people along. So in that case, with a law firm, for instance, you have partners who are paying for a renovation, usually out of their own pocket. It's like, instead of taking home the bonus
Oh,
money for
uh,
themselves, they are investing in the future of the firm. And
wow.
usually those partners have been there a long time. So maybe they're not going to be part of the firm forever, right? They're nearing retirement. So you have this group of individuals who are investing money to create a legacy for their firm. And so that they will be able to hire the next generation of talent that sort of sits in their seats in the future in this new space. And so we talk about it like that. We talk about it understanding where the money is coming from and what is important to these individuals. And in that case, it's centered on legacy and leaving behind something that you're very proud of, and that will continue the work that you've done for, the next generation of people in that law firm.
Yeah, yeah. And you just also mentioned different kind of targets. So you have different stakeholders in front of you. For
Yes.
example, developers or corporate real estate, human
Yes.
resources directors or facility sustainability
Hmm.
teams.
Hmm.
So also in this case, I guess the approach is different. So the message, and not
Hmm.
only the approach, the messages you have to share and to give them are different. So how do you engage with this kind of people?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is preparing before you go in the room. You need to understand if you're meeting the head of facilities or if you're meeting the CFO, because you're going
Oh,
to speak differently.
yeah,
you know,
different
if you're
languages at
meeting,
all.
yeah. And, you know, in the end, people want to be successful. Our clients want to be successful, and we want to help them be successful, and we never want to, but we do provide, constructive criticism. We don't want to present something that they're going to see as taking away from their success, right? Um, the job is to like bolster everybody and make
Yeah,
everybody see the win. And that means that in some cases you're implementing different strategies because of what's important. But we have so many things to choose from in sustainability. There's so many different things you can do. It's so wide that you can usually find something that is going
yeah,
to feel like a no-brainer to the person you're talking to. And when you get to something that feels like a no-brainer to them, then it's not going to get cut out of the project. It's going to stay.
yeah,
The other piece of this is that we really work very closely with our designers to weave sustainable narratives into their core vision of what the job is. Like, what are we designing? And if that story, that core narrative of what are we trying to do here, that you co-create with the client and your internal design team, what are we doing here? If that has nuggets of sustainability in it, or principles like biophilia, then it's also hard for stuff to be removed because it is ingrained in everybody's vision of the project.
yeah. Yeah, I'm perfectly aligned with you. It's always important to figure out what's important for people, and then there is no brainer. They are all on board, they follow you, and sustainability is the common ground that makes sure everybody is on the same page.
Yeah.
And one last question before we open the floor to our audience. What is one practical step attendees can take to apply the ideas we have discussed today? Just one.
hmm I think one thing that we can all do is to seize an opportunity that's in front of us every day, big or small, just to be that one drop in the bucket that, we work to continuously fill, and stop waiting for a perfect opportunity or a perfect project or a perfect client, because that's a little bit of a dream. Work with what you have in front of you and make a difference every day.
Okay, fantastic. So I think we have some questions here. One from Janet Ginsburg. I hope I pronunciate the surname correctly. I tried to summarize it because it's a little bit long. Um, I think it's always the same concept. When you do procurement for sustainable materials, it seems every time it costs more than standard material. So it's the story of having the chicken and the egg at the same time.
hmm
So how
hmm
can we manage this kind of situation, and how can we, help people in understanding it's not a cost, it's an investment. I think it's an investment when you do something in a sustainable way because you
Yeah.
just think for the future. But I'd love to hear also your opinion about it.
I think it's important to think about the longevity of the material and how long it will be in the space before they have to replace it. So that's part of this, right? If you're going to put in, and sometimes we find this, if you're going to put in a carpet or a wall covering that is more sustainable on its face but needs to be replaced on a very high interval, then you should consider that. Like, that may not be the best decision. You may pick something else. But the other comment to this is when you have a space that's fully designed and you have selected materials, and then you try to reselect materials that look exactly the same but are more sustainable, that's very challenging. So what we try to do is only put forward the most sustainable materials so that we don't have a this or that conversation. Um, and I think this is one of the things that the beauty behind GPS is that those baseline standards, we confirmed with our research that they don't add cost, that they are readily available in the market. It's sort of removing the the bottom performers rather than selecting only the tippy top. And
Yeah.
so that's one way you can avoid adding cost. I think the other thing um, is just to use less of a material,
Yeah.
to have less layering, less rugs on top of carpet, less multiple levels of drapery. Anything that we can do to just use less materials is very important. And, if you have a client who's hesitant to use something, and let's say they're a big client, then I would go with a mock-up or a pilot space, either where they currently are, like a new concrete we might test out on the sidewalk in front of their current office, just so they can see it and step on it and get used to it. Um, the same with a carpet or something else. If they're hesitant about it, I like to just have them live with the material for a little bit, and usually that alleviates the fear, because I don't often see people do the actual pricing of A versus B. Usually it's instinctually more expensive or looks more expensive or assumed to be more expensive. So also just getting a reality check on that is important.
Yeah, thank you. I have here another question from Alessia Canuto. I suppose she is Italian from name and surname. Are materials and designs chosen country or regulatory specific, or do you observe the same trends across contexts?
Mm. We do not observe the same trends across contexts. So, well, let me pull that back a little. The types of materials that have impact, which also has to do a lot with the volume of the material, like ceilings, walls, and flooring are going to be your biggest players. That's sort of a universal rule of thumb that you can use. The availability of data to prove which materials are sustainable and to have EPDs available or to do embodied carbon testing, any of those things, those are not equally spread across countries. And we find that, sometimes we're left with the choice of shipping a material from a far distance that has proven sustainability standards, or selecting one that's close by that has less data to back it up. And that's always sort of an interesting conversation to have. But we do not find universal transparency.
Yeah, because sometimes, at least in my experience, what is valid in Europe, it's not the same in the States. So there
That's
is
right.
kind of, differentiation, which are one from one side and the other from the opposite side. So, for
Hmm.
example, for companies who are multinational and have, plants based in different parts of the world, sometimes it's very difficult to comply with. And to be able
Yes.
to arrange everything using, for example, one certifications, one KPI, it doesn't work. You have
Yeah.
to geocalize somehow where you are, and
Yes.
in order to meet the requirements of that specific place in the world.
Yeah.
I have here
When
another
we ca-
interest. Oh,
when we
yeah,
can't
sorry.
find the thing that we want, the data that we want, or the material that we want, we switch over to advocacy. So in a market where the data isn't available, it's very important to put out the message that you're looking for the information, because they have to hear that from enough people in order to start producing the information. So you can't sort of be super quiet about, like, I looked online and I couldn't find this, so I'm just gonna move on. You need to call the manufacturers and the reps and tell them that you would really like this information and you wish that it was available. They have it available here. You'd love it to be available where you are.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have here another interesting question from Mary. Given administrative shifts in the US, are you seeing any pullback in sustainability commitments? And if so, how are you responding?
Yeah. We have seen the pendulum swing between, like, the private sector taking ownership and the public sector taking ownership um, of this type of space in the US. And what's interesting is they sort of leapfrog each other. So if the administration or the government regulations in the US feel lax, then the private sector starts competing with each other and building up, you know, what they feel is the best. They all sort of have a race to quality. And then if it swings back towards government regulation, those regulations now know what's possible and they sort of jump forward. And that has played out many times. And so right now it's private sector driven.
Oh,
Um, we're also seeing a lot of changing of language without changing of action. And that's more complicated. Um, but we are seeing people continually moving forward, maybe in different ways, maybe in quieter ways, but we're still seeing sort of a move towards sustainable design.
yeah. Okay, let me see here. I have another question. Maybe partially you have already replied, but still, let's have the question from Valerie. I see a lot of refreshing of offices and amenity areas that are just changing interiors for trends, but the
Yes.
current design is not worn or aesthetically unpleasing. Do you ever suggest that the owner and user keep what they have and not improve the space, or how do you deal with this? In essence, the fast fashion of interiors we are talking about here.
Yeah. I see this most often in sort of like restaurants and retail spaces where they want to be very fresh all the time. And that is part of how they, we were talking about how people make their money. This is part of, how they get people to move through their spaces. I think there are a couple options when you're in this circumstance. One is often if you have gently used furniture, especially occasional furniture like you would see in a lobby, you can connect it to an organization that needs furniture. So we do pro bono projects where we sort of connect these clients who have the luxury maybe of disposing of goods that are not worn out with people who would really appreciate those. And so part of it is that connection. And the other part is from the beginning, designing a space that has within it the ability to transform. So in the same way you would sort of like have a basic wardrobe and then add accessories, like how do we design a space that sort of has those really good bones and neutrals, and something like the marble doesn't need to be replaced while still changing the paint and maybe the accents can really bring new life to it. And so I think you have to go after that at the beginning. And then if you take it a step further, it's about sort of demountable partitions and things that can be moved and rearranged. Um, and sometimes when we have a client who's not sure um, how their space is going to play out, they're buying things that will last for 15 years, but they do not know their business projections, how many staff they're going to have, what it's going to be like to work in their office for the next 15 years. Things that are reconfigurable are a good option there so that you don't end up ripping stuff out and putting new stuff in that's similar but not the same.
Yeah, yeah. Good suggestion. I have here another question from Janet, um, which says, okay, the focus, at least in our conversation, the one we had, was mostly on carbon emissions and chemicals. But what about
Mhm.
water? Because water is an important resource, declining, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so how do you design sustainability for the future world, also considering this aspect? So not only carbon
Mhm.
emission, which are important, we know,
Yeah.
but what about water, which is maybe even more important?
Yeah. I mean, I think we address this at several scales. So one is you have to understand the local water situation. So are you dealing with scarcity or surplus? Is water coming, is it dry most of the time and coming in peak moments, right? Or is it, are you sourcing from an aquifer? Is there a levee that's providing you water? Like, where is your water coming from? Often we store water on site to even out those surpluses and droughts so that we can have consistent operations within our buildings. And usually that has that results in an on-site storage tank. We also really advocate for what we call here a purple pipe system, or just using the water more than once. So what flushes your toilet is a different quality of water than what comes out of your sink. And so in that way, we tried to create a lower water demand. The other piece is thinking about like storage in the case of like a storm situation where the local municipality may not be able to handle the surplus of water. So in many of our projects, we tried to keep all the water that falls on site within our project boundary, either through catchment tanks or like green roofs and landscaping and bioswales and things that can sort of delay that water so that it infiltrates. Um, you know, what I think is interesting is when you look at places where we continue to build and there's a clear indicator that there's going to be severe water scarcity, yet there's still people wanting to invest and build there. That I think is sort of a bigger conundrum, and the focus is on being self-sufficient.
Mm,
If there's no municipal water, how is your building going to function? And can it
yeah,
function? And can it keep people safe? Um, and so, because we're working globally, like the problem changes all over the
yeah,
place. We have tried to build cohorts of people who are experiencing similar climate conditions. So the people who are building in cities where hurricanes or typhoons are prevalent, they talk to each other. And the cities where we're building, like Phoenix, where they have droughts, they talk to each other about what they're facing. And I think that is helpful to have a group to brainstorm with, and also to see how different regions around the world who have the same climatic problem or weather problems, how they um, can be inspired by each other, because the
yeah,
solutions can be quite different around the globe to the same problem, but they're very transferable.
yeah, yeah. I agree with you. I think we have one last question for today's discussion. So there's so much information around carbon emission and sustainability, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So
Mhm.
what's a good place for someone to start without needing to be an expert? Where to start? The beginning, but where's the beginning?
Yeah, where's the beginning? Should I assume this person is a designer, or should I assume this person is like my mother? Where are we starting with that? Give
Mm,
me a starting point.
yeah, both. Let's start with your mother, but also afterwards with the designer, because it's important, your point of view.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so if I'm talking to my mom about embodied carbon and where to start, I would just talk to her about, you know, buying things that take less work to manufacture. So this is everything from like buying the apple instead of buying the apple that has been pre-sliced and frozen and come in a car, to you from another location while being frozen. Like, I think we just talk about that, buying things in sort of the purest, simplest form. That's a good way to reduce your carbon impact. If I'm talking to a designer, then I would talk about looking at the one material on your project that you have the most volume of. So that might be gypsum wallboard, it might be your ceiling tile, it might be your carpet. Usually it's one of those, or your hard surface flooring. And when you're selecting those materials, ask for the EPD and look at the carbon number. And that's how you start. Just look at that one material on the job that's on your desk.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I think it was a fantastic conversation, and thank you, Katie, for your availability, your inspiration. It was lovely to be with you today, and thank you all for joining us today. We hope you find the discussion insightful and that it inspires new ways to approach sustainability and health in your projects. As always, keep an eye out for our upcoming episodes on the Future is Circular podcast. In the next one, we will explore the role of certification in standardizing sustainability data and addressing greenwashing more broadly, looking at how they provide clarity and credibility across the global landscape. So, once again, thank you for your time, your engagement, and Katie, for your passion and your clarity. You are really, really inspiring all of us, and your commitment to building a healthier and more sustainable future. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.